Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Tuesday, December 19th, 2023. Moving swiftly through the week. And, well, I don't know. Here we are on the second day. Lots to catch up on, lots to prepare you with. I need to, I don't know what. Well, first of all, I need to remind everybody. Well, we don't know. I don't know. Is it a reminder or just inform everybody? Last week, we were off. We had to do the pre-recorded show. It was a travel day, Tuesday, so we didn't get a chance to visit with Joan McCarter. And in letting her know about that, I asked her, hey, by the way, what's up for next Tuesday? Are you going to be available? And she said, well, we may have to play it by ear. It's busy season, shopping season, preparation season, who knows, baking season, or just plain too much news going on season, or to hell with it, I've been doing this show for 100 years season. So I'm not positive whether we're going to get a chance to speak with Joan, but if we do, we'll consider it a lucky bonus, and we'll take it. I don't know how she's feeling about a Boxing Day appearance, but everyone loves saying Boxing Day, so that's coming up next week. We'll see, and then, we'll get more chances to visit during the new year, which, of course, will mean time for us to catch up on when the government will be at least partially closing next. So we can update you on some of those things. And then, of course, the other hot social media topics of the day, which is not necessarily a reflection of where actual people live their lives. But, we're extremely online. And so we're aware of that, and it's okay with us. And we forgive ourselves. Let's see, Justice hinting at a couple of things for us to take under consideration. Let's see, yes, Mark Meadows, his case in court. I think, long story short there, was he was looking for removal of his case in, where was it? It was in the Georgia case. And removal of his case from state court into federal court because, of course, he claims he was a federal official at the time, et cetera, et cetera. And they basically said, no to that. A lot of, I guess, what he was involved in, or a lot of his claim was that he was once a federal official and so therefore should be handling his case in federal court. And they said, well, no special treatment for former federal officials. But in all likelihood, there was also, I don't know, I didn't catch up on the ruling. I just saw that he came out on the short end of the stick, which is fine by me, but his claims were always kind of tenuous. I was a federal official at the time. Yes, acting outside of your capacity, or what was supposed to be your capacity in federal officialdom. I was a federal official when I committed that crime. Yes, I know. You and Bob Menendez can talk about that. So, anyway, not likely to see his case removed anytime soon. Let's see. Oh, yeah, this was big news yesterday. The Pope, the Catholic one, said that it's okay to, how did he put it? I don't know, because, I don't know. Did he say it in Spanish, Italian, Latin? I don't know. English? Very likely. But breakthrough in the sense that it was okay to bless same-sex marriages. I don't know that that's the same thing as perform them. I don't know if Catholic priests will be licensed to do that, but I think there was some sort of odd compromise put forward that said, it's okay to bless those unions and accept people into church practice, but that maybe the wedding had to be secular, but I don't know. So maybe they still can't perform Catholic wedding masses for them, but that it's okay. You don't have to, stick to any weird doctrines about, the church says I can't have you in here. Yes, you can. And that seems like a positive step forward. I definitely did not keep up with that development, but I did see it in passing and saw people wondering, hey, are the Cardinals going to revolt and get rid of this Pope? I don't know. But he's infallible. So what the hell are you talking about? I don't know. Sometimes that's one of the problems, giving people infallibility, just like giving them immunity forever. You got to be prepared to accept the consequences of that. At any rate, we got that going on and lots more. Greg actually reports, let's see, this from earlier this morning. He sent this through via our Skype back channel. His internet, I guess, is still back up. However, it was in fact storm related that he was unable to join us yesterday. His electricity was okay. I didn't check whether his electricity didn't go out or whether it's just the fact that he has the generators kept him, electric powered, but the internet connectivity wasn't there. Or whether it was just one of those weird circumstances in which somehow the power lines are okay, but the internet service lines, whatever they may be, just not working. At any rate, he says there are still more than 27,000 Connecticut residents still without power after the storm as of 6 a.m. Tuesday. And so, we say, I don't know, do we say anything to them? Nothing. You can't hear us. Hello, we're listening to the podcast 2 days late because that's when the power went back on. Glad you're okay. Hope you were staying warm this whole time with, hot chocolate or whatever is the favored source of warmth for you in this holiday season. But, all right, well, that's true, and we have to acknowledge that. I guess we should acknowledge there are probably 3 people listening in Iceland, and 2 of them weren't able to listen to the show because they had to evacuate because there's a volcano going off. But there's volcanoes going off all the time. There are earthquakes certainly every day. But a spectacular show, unless your house is being consumed by lava, I guess. But so far, so good. And it's just a big show, and the town is evacuated. And as I understand it, it's down on that. I couldn't tell you the name of the peninsula that we're talking about, but it contains, well, if you've ever been to Iceland, you've been on that peninsula. I think the airport is there. Blue Lagoon is there, and Reykjavik really occupies the eastern part of that stretch of land. So it's nearby where you've been if you've been to Iceland. So I don't know. It doesn't ring alarm bells there when a volcano is going off. They know what to do because the whole place is volcanic. All right. Well, that all being the case. And I guess we haven't acknowledged all natural disasters everywhere in the world. That's true. There's always another one. I think there was a major earthquake I just saw. My weather app, for some reason, says, you know what? You're probably more concerned with how cold is it near you and what's going to fall out of the sky in your neighborhood. But I can tell you what happened underneath the ground in China today. And, good to know. I don't know whether I consider earthquakes weather, but I don't know where else to put it in the news. If you have to put it in it's not sports. I can tell you that. But large earthquake, sizable in China today. I don't know. Just keeping up. Other natural disasters. I don't know. Unnatural disasters. Donald Trump. That we'll be keeping up with, and briefing you on to no end. All right. It's time then. We'll turn to Pocket. We also have some suggested stories from Rosalind McGregor, some of which she has recorded, I think, for the upcoming sort of, I don't know if you would call it vacation week, but holiday celebration week, during which time many people will not get out of their pajamas for much of the day, and we can save those for then. But she also has a couple of stories that she's suggested, hey, you should just take a look at this article. It doesn't warrant a full update necessarily, so we can sprinkle a few of those in to keep some interest. First thing that has popped up in my email today probably would be a good Tuesday story. Whether or not we're able to connect with Joan today, we would probably want to update everybody on this. We'll use the Hills email update because, they slipped it in right at the last second and caught my attention as 9 o'clock approached. The GOP, them, the Republican Party. The GOP says no Christmas deal for Ukraine or the border. Remember that's what they were working on, and they were going to use the fact that they would all want to get out of here for Christmas week, month, whatever, the last 6 months of the year. Christmas is coming. The Hallmark Channel says so. Time for us to get out of here. Looks like there won't be any deal in place, which only increases the pressure when they return and, of course, increases the likelihood of partial or total government shutdown later on. when the parts of the government not yet funded have their CRs run out one after the other, thanks to the bifurcated process. Here's what's going on. Alexander Bolton and Al Weaver update us. Senate Republicans say there's no chance of a deal before Christmas. Hard not to believe that. It's already Tuesday. And as you know, like by Wednesday, they could be saying, this is it. It's weekend. It's time for us to get out of here. So no chance of a deal before Christmas on funding the war in Ukraine. They'll be sad about that one. And enacting new border security reforms. And Republicans might be pretend to be sad about that one, but actually be happy because they'll say, see, failure, something, border, yada, yada, open, 80 years old, something, yada. That's our pitch, basically. That's about all we got. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer had tentatively scheduled a vote on the package this week, but Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma he led the negotiations for Republicans. We could say it that way. He's the lead Republican negotiator, not made of lead, L-E-A-D. Got the tense wrong there. And he told reporters Monday, as he was leading, I guess, that he doesn't expect White House and Senate negotiators to reach an agreement in the next few days, given the unresolved issues still on the table. Like, Republicans still don't really care anything about Ukraine because a lot of them are pro-Russian, and they don't care anything about the border because while they absolutely positively do hate brown immigrants, and do get a lot of votes by screaming about wanting to close the border, they don't really want to close the border either, because if they did that, then people would say, okay, well, that issue's resolved. Except, of course, for immigrant populations who would say, okay, they're still discriminating against us as always, but we need to get in there, so we'll just have to find another way. Well, we're clearly not going to have text complete by this week to be able to have a vote and to be able to pull this stuff together. We'll keep working until we get it done. This is Lankford, I guess. We're all going to be back in January on this, but it's going to take a while to be able to finish up all the text. What an informative statement. Lankford said he didn't expect the bipartisan negotiating group to release a framework this week either. So not only will we not have the written text of an agreement, we don't have an agreement on how to agree. Great. Okay. I don't anticipate a document coming out and saying to everybody, okay, here's what it is. This is going to be a moving target, he added. I don't think I like the way Lankford describes things. It's uninformative, certainly, but it's, weirdly structured as well. Senate Republican Whip John Thune confirmed Monday that there won't be a deal this week. We'll work through the Christmas break, no they won't, and hopefully have something ready to vote on in January, he said. Obviously, we're not getting this done this week for sure. That's a great way of, I'm not doing anything this week, so I'm definitely not doing anything this week. The talks have stalled amid strong pushback from critics in both parties who have raised the alarm about the lack of transparency in the talks and the possibility that party leaders would try to jam a deal through the Senate with little review right before the holiday recess. All right, so at least they're signaling they don't want that. Maybe that's what this is really about. Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell, who last week warned it would be practically impossible to pass a Ukraine and border security package before Christmas, on Monday pumped the brakes on the negotiations yet again. By the way, it always was a strange pairing, Ukraine and the border. And I don't know whether it's still Ukraine and Israel and Taiwan and the border. But even if it's just Ukraine and the border, the pairing is interesting to Republicans. We gotta, make sure people don't invade the neighboring country. It's an invasion from Mexico. We're being invaded. We gotta close the border. Oh, well, there's an invasion going on over here. The Russians are actually invading Ukraine with an army. Should we help them? No, who cares about invasions? We only care about our own invasions. I guess that's a way of looking at things, right? We take care of our own first, except taking care of our own means shooting at people or arresting people or drowning people who would like to come here and be part of our own. But, try and understand a Republican. Go ahead. If you want to. It's like one of those weird puzzles people like to work on over Christmas. It's 10,000 pieces, and it'll take you forever to put it together. If you want to try to decipher them, go ahead. I say just, oppose them and beat them and then try and rework the puzzle with different pieces. All right. Border security policy is complex. It does say that right in here. And our colleagues at the negotiating table are clear-eyed about the fact that getting this agreement right and producing legislative text is going to require some time. This is McConnell saying this. Of course, what does that mean? That sounds reasonable. Well, in case you were confused about that, he blamed Democrats and the White House for showing up late to the negotiating table and warned that Republicans won't waive our responsibility to carefully negotiate and review any agreement before voting on it. Okay, I mean, the talks have only been going on for weeks, and both sides have been there, so what can I tell you? McConnell is coming under pressure from Senate conservatives, including Ron Johnson, who's barely, got brain function, and Mike Lee, who's just an ideologue and an idiot, to hold off on agreeing to any deal with Democrats until the GOP-controlled House reconvenes in January. Johnson and Lee joined 13 other Republican senators in signing a letter Sunday warning that rushed and secret negotiations with Democrats who want an open border and who caused the current crisis will not secure the border. Okay, they had to get that in there. It doesn't really fit in the sentence, but, they actually are under orders. You gotta say somewhere in every communication that Democrats want open borders. Do they want open borders? No. But put it in there anyway. They've called on the Senate GOP conference chairman, John Barrasso from Wyoming, to schedule a special GOP conference meeting the week of January 8th when House lawmakers will be back in Washington to discuss how to proceed on a border security and Ukraine funding package. What a unique demand that is. How about when we come back to Washington from after the break, we should have a meeting and discuss how we're going to approach things. Wow, that is a hell of a plan. Only 17 Republican senators out of a total of 49 showed up for Monday afternoon's vote on Biden's nomination of Martin O'Malley to serve as Social Security Commissioner. Schumer, nonetheless, tried to sound as optimistic as possible on Monday, touting what he called the significant progress that negotiators made over the weekend. I urge them to keep going, advising senators that they will vote on 11 senior military promotions this week. Remember that problem? While the border security negotiations continue off the floor. The bipartisan negotiating group met again Monday evening to build on what they accomplished over the weekend. I guess they might have done something. Who knows? Some Democrats are questioning whether it makes sense for the Senate to stay in session the rest of the week. Of course. Now that it's clear that there won't be a deal on Ukraine funding and border security. Senator Chris Coons, always the first one out the door when there's a break in the offing, said he and his colleagues will have a discussion Tuesday about whether the border security negotiations would be better served if the rest of the Senate went home early this week and he could go to dinner with his wife. He has a lot invested in that, apparently. That's his thing. I gotta get out of here and go a couple 100 miles to the northeast and go to dinner. I mean, I understand when the Hawaii senators want to be like, please, why don't we just close it down and let me go for the week? But the Delaware guy, he's always out, ready to get out the door. Anyway, I think we have to have a conversation. We need to have a conversation as a caucus about this. He said, can we help make progress in negotiations by staying here longer this week? I guess Chris Coons says no. Coons said he heard from colleagues. So my colleagues are telling me. You wouldn't know them. They're from Canada. Colleagues that negotiators have made positive, steady, meaningful progress toward resolving a deal, but they need more than the next 3 days to finish. Schumer has come under pressure from Latino and liberal senators in his caucus who have warned President Biden not to agree to Trump-era border enforcement policies, such as expanded expulsion authority to deny migrants asylum screenings. My goodness, this is a lot longer than I thought. But we might as well update ourselves on the situation in the chambers here. Senator Alex Padilla of California, who has led the criticism of the talks, said he and other advocates for immigrants' rights are largely being kept in the dark about the proposed reforms. I think there's overwhelming bipartisan concern that there's a lack of visibility, he told The Hill, blaming both sides for that. The negotiators have made the most progress on raising the threshold for asylum claims, but they have yet to reach an agreement on how to reform the practice of humanitarian parole of migrants after they're detained by Customs and Border Protection, or whether to require migrants who travel through safe third-party countries before coming to the United States to stay in those other countries while their asylum claims process. Negotiators have also discussed giving Biden broader expulsion power to turn back migrants without allowing them to go through asylum screenings, as well as expanded power to detain and deport migrants. Conservative senators are leery of any deal that would leave the enforcement of new asylum and border policy to Biden's discretion. Lee wrote on Twitter on Sunday that Biden always had the authority to stop what he called the madness at the border and can't be trusted to crack down on the flow of 10,000 migrants a day just because Congress gives the administration $106 billion in emergency foreign aid. Lankford said while negotiations have made progress, no chapter in the talks can be closed out because every issue is under discussion is related. When we get a section complete as far as negotiated, we get it written, and then we come back and we have to evaluate it. Does that actually line up? That's not done because the next section also connects to this one, he explained. Not very well. We're committed to getting it done, but trying to get through all the details of what that means and how it actually integrates, it's challenging. Thanks, Jim. That was really super. Okay, well, so we have some idea of where they are in the negotiating process. Speaking of the migrant situation, I should look up the story here. I saw lots, and I don't think I put any of them aside. But yesterday, which one shall we grab? Let's try the AP news story about this. But Texas has tried to empower itself to enforce border policy again. They keep trying to find ways into this, and it's just really precluded to them by the Constitution. Just immigration is a federal issue, and there really is just no space for state intervention. But, you know, they're trying to find cracks around the margins so that they can grandstand on that. Let's see. AP writes, Texas governor signs bill that lets, maybe, sort of, police arrest migrants who enter the U.S. illegally. Now, if you're not a close follower of the situation, that might strike you as odd. Well, I mean, of course, that people can get arrested for entering the U.S. illegally, but the issue here, again, is Texas trying to empower state officials to enforce federal law, and it's not entirely clear that they actually have that authority. So they tried to give themselves that authority, and the Texas governor is happy to say, yes, I can do this. But, of course, it'll ultimately be up to federal courts to decide that. And that will probably motivate people in Texas to try to run to one of their favorite single-judge districts and get a federal court ruling saying it's A-OK and ignoring large swaths of the Constitution. Let's see. Valerie Gonzalez and Paul Weber are the reporters on this one. Texas Republican Governor Greg Abbott, on Monday, yesterday, approved sweeping new powers for himself, essentially, that allow police to arrest migrants who illegally cross the U.S. border and give local judges authority to order them to leave the country, testing the limits of how far a state, any state, can go to enforce immigration laws. Opponents, including Constitution itself, have called the measure the most dramatic attempt by a state to police immigration since a 2010 Arizona law, denounced by critics as the Show Me Your Papers bill, do you remember this one? That was largely struck down by the U.S. Supreme Court. Immigration enforcement is a federal responsibility, and Texas's law is also likely to face swift legal challenges. Abbott doesn't really care about that. He will yell about activist judges when and if that is struck down. Anyway, the law, which takes effect in March because they're so serious about things, allows any Texas law enforcement officer to arrest people who are suspected of entering the country illegally. Once in custody, they could either agree to a Texas judge's order to leave the U.S. or be prosecuted on misdemeanor charges of illegal entry. Migrants who don't leave could face arrest again under more serious felony charges. Abbott, who signed the law in front of a section of border fence in Brownsville, predicted the number of people crossing illegally into Texas would drop by, what's his prediction? well over 50%, maybe 75%. He did not offer any evidence for that estimate. And of course, there isn't any, so, don't wait for it. The consequences of it are so extreme that the people being smuggled by the cartels, they will not want to be coming to the state of Texas, he said. I doubt it. The law, they don't want to be going to the state of Texas. They want to enter the United States. They wish Texas was out of their way, but that's what's on the other side of where they're crossing, so it happens. Now, it happens in other states too, of course, but it's not because they're dying to be in Texas. Anyway, the law adds another tension point over immigration amid a struggle between the White House and Senate negotiators to reach a border deal. Republicans in Congress, of course, we know this now, demanding changes to the immigration system in exchange for any help with Ukraine, Israel, and other national security needs. Because who cares about national security? Texas Republicans have increasingly challenged the U.S. government's authority over immigration, saying Joe Biden's administration isn't doing enough to control the 1,950-mile southern border. Texas has, of course, bused more than 65,000 migrants to cities across America since August of 2022, and recently installed razor wire along the banks of the Rio Grande, which has snagged and injured some asylum seekers. The U.S. government on Monday temporarily shut down 2 railroad border crossings in Texas, a move that rail operators said would hamper trade ahead of Christmas. Boo. Troy Miller, U.S. Customs and Border Protection's acting commissioner, I can't do the acting tape now, anyway, said the closures at Eagle Pass and El Paso were a response to more migrants traveling on freight trains, particularly over the last week. Miller said authorities are seeing unprecedented arrivals at the border, topping 10,000 crossings on some days this month. Okay, so there's the basis for the 10,000 number. Anyway, we'll be right back with, more news and stuff. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, let's see. Where to go to next? There's more to the Hills article about, or the AP article about what's going on in Texas, but I'm not certain whether we're adding more to the story by reading the various criticisms of it. Is there any more technical information that we might want to share about this? Let's see. The ACLU has said it will challenge the measure in court, as we probably would have expected. More than 20 congressional Democrats signed a letter urging the Justice Department to sue to stop the law. The law, by the way, known as Senate Bill 4 down there in Texas. And, it's just a likely unconstitutional overstep of state authority, overstep by state authority over federal authority. And we'll see what kind of judge they draw and whether they get a crazy one who makes a problem by ignoring all major precedent on the subject and just says, to hell with it. we're going to rule the opposite of what's required here. And by the way, though, I guess we'll add this to it. Mexico's government has also rebuked the measure. Under bilateral and international agreements, Mexico is required to accept deportations of its own citizens, but not those of other countries. So why does that impact things? Because, of course, most of the immigrants are not actually coming originally from Mexico, but, blind Republican border policies sees everyone brown as Mexican. And so why can't we just kick them back over to Mexico? And Mexico says, what are you looking at us for? Mexico is required, though, to accept deportations only of its own citizens. Under Texas law, or this Texas law, migrants ordered to leave would be sent to ports of entry along the border with Mexico, even if they're not Mexican citizens. We can't be expected to figure this out. We'll just send them to Mexico. They're all Mexicans in our view. It's not really a way of handling things. Now, in September and October, Venezuelans were the largest nationality arrested for illegally crossing the U.S. border. And throwing them into Mexico does nothing for anybody. So, that's kind of some interest. By the way, it's too bad that they're forced to do things this way. I think you'll all find there's a great taste for Mexican food, Tex-Mex, if you will, here in the United States. And if you think you like tacos, you're all going to really enjoy arepas. So if you just let the Venezuelans in, they're going to bring some delicious cuisine. You're going to be very happy with this. You should give it a try. But, that could be 30, 40 years down the road before people figure this out. All right, let's see. Is there anything else we want to throw in here from this? I don't know. I'm just sort of scanning down, but I don't think so. I think that's probably the most important of the last of the most important points to distill from the AP reporting on this. Now, there's much better, and much more interesting reporting from our immigration specialists out there among the progressive community who can speak to the magnitude of the change and the likely impacts of it. But I wanted to sort of give you all I can do for the moment is give you this sort of generalist overview. What happened in the last day or two? What did Abbott do? Why is it such a problem? And, of course, the experts will be analyzing things, parsing them closely, and I am sure that later this week we can add some of their commentary to our discussion. There are, of course, other subjects out there, some directly relevant to what you would expect, and some coming from out of left field, including this one, which I think I'll borrow from my brother Mark's characterization of it here. Interesting times in history. Just sort of note how things are changing internationally. Newsweek reporting that Germany, you know them, the country, right? I mean, who else did you think it was? Germany to permanently deploy troops abroad, that is, for the first time since World War II. So one way of putting it is, well, you remember what happened when they shipped their troops across the border last time. It was World War II. However, I think we can expect better. But just in case you were wondering, why, where, when, how, what's going on, what's the situation that demands this? And the answer has to do in part with Republicans here in the United States screwing with various important issues, entangling two or more of them so that no progress can be made on either front. The Ukraine issue. I'm tired of pushing back against Putin and Russia because, after all, I'm pro-Russia, pro-Putin, and my job here is to make it impossible for the United States to stand up for itself internationally and then blame Democrats for being weak internationally. So I'm going to do that, and that's, I guess, on their minds. And so here are other countries realizing it's actually terrible for the security situation in Europe for us to give the green light, essentially, to Russian invasion in Eastern and Central Europe. That would be a bad idea. We have a whole alliance that's premised on that, and that has been the basis of the international security structure in Europe and really around the world since the end of World War II. Oh, and that's going away? Okay, well then it's time for Germany to deploy its army abroad again. So where are they going? Ukraine? No, not that dangerous. But it's related, and you'll probably understand it. If you take a look at a map, you'll understand exactly what's going on here. A new agreement between Germany and Lithuania will lead to German troops, that's troops with an apostrophe afterward. The troops themselves are going to be going. It is their first permanent foreign deployment since World War II, which, by the way, did not work out well for the Germans. So they're probably a little nervous, but it's entirely different in nature, right? The announcement was made Monday in Lithuania. That's where I'd make it. Where Defense Minister, oh my gosh. All right, how are we with Lithuanian names? Defense Minister Arvydas, maybe? Anasauskas. Oh my goodness. I have no experience with Lithuanian at all. Well, okay. The defense minister, a very important person in Lithuania, I'm sure, as everywhere, met with his German counterpart, another important guy, Boris Pistorius. I think I can get that one out. I think that's probably right. To outline a multi-year roadmap action plan. I'm not certain how that would be said in Lithuanian, but that's up to you. Is there even, I guess they have a Lithuanian dialect, I assume. I know nothing about Lithuania, except that it lies right there in the middle, the sort of place where Russians have and may yet again decide to invade and occupy, and that's the worry, and that's why the German troops being deployed there, to provide a disincentive for that. So they're outlining a multi-year roadmap action plan involving approximately 4,800 permanently stationed German soldiers. Both officials called the move an historical moment, although it was written here a historical moment. It's not an ahistorical moment, but it is an historical moment. It's not ahistorical, it's real. Anyway, not just for their nations, but for NATO as well. Remember them? Yes. And remember that there's a guy running for president who wants to dismantle NATO for some strange reason. And that guy is somebody who the former Speaker of the House thinks is being paid by Putin. That is weird, isn't it? German troops, including those with families, okay, will be stationed in the Lithuanian cities of, oh boy, I know one of them, but not the other. Kaunas, Kaunas. Not familiar. I mean, again, I'm not familiar with Lithuania, but I am familiar with the capital, I think, is Vilnius, right? So those two cities will host these German troops, including those with families. It's an interesting way of putting it. I guess their families are moving too. There's going to be like family housing on the bases. And I guess that's somehow significant. Otherwise, like, who cares if they have families? They're not there, right? Okay. Well, anyway, this will all begin in 2024, which is like a million years from now, except it's actually only a couple of weeks. But most of the troops will be deployed in 2025 and 26, which, probably, I don't know. I think they hope that's still in ahead of any invasion, but okay. A full operation capability expected by 2027. In turn, Lithuania has committed to providing all necessary civilian and military infrastructure. Okay. Let's see. There's an embedded tweet here from the defense minister of Lithuania. And so he's on Twitter if you want to follow, although we have to see whether he'll move over to Blue Sky or Mastodon and abandon Elon Musk sometime soon. The agreement was originally announced in June, but no timeline was presented at that time. Now they have a timeline, 100 years from now. The German commitment of permanently stationing a brigade in Lithuania is a historical step, Why won't people use that? For both Germany and Lithuania. Yeah, sure, it is. That according to that guy, the defense minister, on Monday in a press release. We are turning over a page of even deeper strategic partnership. He speaks Lithuanian chiefly. He went on. That's good. The German brigade will significantly increase our defensive potential and enhance NATO deterrence and collective defense. That's the whole idea here. The roadmap signed today lays out in detail the track we and Germany will take to implement it. Pistorius said the move was a positive step in defense relations, considering the lengthy war between Ukraine and Russia, the latter of which borders Lithuania. Belarus, a close ally of Russia, also borders Lithuania. And it's a good idea, especially since it would be exceptionally provocative, I think, if the United States, say, were to deploy troops to Lithuania. And the Russians have probably said, well, if America stations troops in Lithuania, we'll XYZ. But they never said what they would do if Germany did it, and that's what they're counting on. There's a pop-up ad standing in the way of our reading the rest of this thing. I mean, it's actually literally right over the text of the article, and there's nothing you can do to get rid of it, apparently. So that's pretty weird. All right, so why don't we jump out of that discussion, unless you'd like some technical aspects of who will be there and what they'll be doing. Are you up to date on the German divisions? Did they have any counterparts to World War II era organization or not? Sometimes history buffs know this stuff. The 203rd Panzer Battalion, based in North Rhine-Westphalia, and the 122nd Armored Infantry Battalion, based in Bavaria, will be moved to Lithuania. So look out for pretzels and beer all over Lithuania from now on, I guess. And they'll be arriving in BMWs, presumably. Lithuania's enhanced Forward Presence Battalion Battle Group will be transformed into a multinational battalion to become an integral part of the brigade, in case you were interested in the dynamics and who will be commanding and what are they working on, how are they working it out, and what sort of divisions will they be. Okay, very interesting. Germany, it is noted here, deployed forces to Afghanistan following the 9/11 attacks on the U.S. in 2001. The first German troops arrived in Kabul in January of 2002 and remained in Afghanistan until January of 2022. So it's not that there have been no German troops deployed outside of their borders since World War II. It's just, it was never meant to be permanent. It was just a mere 20-year stay in Afghanistan. Whereas this time it's going to be even longer, although who knows whether conditions will remain the same for that long. But I guess despite any future developments in the internal politics of Russia, the Germans are committed to a permanent presence in Lithuania. Okay, it is an interesting moment in history. We'll have to keep an eye on those things. Other things to consider here. Let's see. I wanted to acknowledge here something from Brian Beutler and his, is it Substack? Again, I can never tell whether it's actually officially Substack or not. His Off Message, which is the title of his newsletter, to which at this point I regret to say I still do not subscribe, but may perhaps want to do so in the future. I've always been a big, at least a big moral supporter of Brian's. Maybe financial support is in the offing in the future, but that part of the discussion which I can see and share with you, despite not being a subscriber, was of some interest. He's writing here about what he calls the Supreme Court's plan to save Donald Trump coming into focus. Exactly what's he talking about? We don't know yet. The subheader won't tell us. Democrats might be able to upend it. Tells us that. That's good news. But they have to get loud now, and that's the part that I was mostly interested in. That part about getting loud. What's going on? Maybe we can see if we can understand the dynamics of what he thinks is going on here. Here's something he says Democrats should get comfortable saying on every media platform available to them. This is the part I like. If the Republican-controlled Supreme Court, and that's how you should describe it, intervenes for any reason to prevent a jury from deliberating Donald Trump's guilt before the 2024 elections, it will be the most disgraceful decision since Dobbs and the most corrupt and partisan since Bush v. Gore. Key point there, really just the use of the purposefully inflammatory and not even unduly inflammatory language there. It strikes me as the sort of thing that Newt Gingrich would absolutely have said in his day, were the shoe on the other foot. He would absolutely be laying this out and saying, this is the most corrupt and partisan thing the Supreme Court has done since XYZ. And he would have picked something outrageous at that, probably Dred Scott, something like that. Meant to be shocking, but that's absolutely true, and it's absolutely worth saying frequently and loudly that if the Supreme Court does something to get in the way of the American people being handed an answer on is Trump guilty of insurrection before we are asked to, on his theory, immunize him forever with re-election, and even, we don't even need his theory of presidential immunity to effectively immunize him forever, because if he's reelected, he, I assume, would immediately move to pardon himself and everybody connected to him of any federal crimes in the hopes that he would never face prosecution again. If the Supreme Court intervenes to in any way that delays the schedule such that we can't get a verdict before we're asked to vote on this. There are a number of problems that arise from that, but I think probably the best way of expressing it is, yes, that would be the most partisan and corrupt thing the Supreme Court has ever done, probably. Why not just throw that in there? It would be problematic, let's say, on so many levels. But you can be, I think, safe from accusations of hyperbole. Well, at least you can rest assured that you're right. That won't prevent anybody from accusing you of hyperbole using language like this. That's true. You should go ahead and do it. That's good advice from Brian. Here's his reasoning for it. Why does he say so? It's because the means by which the court might interfere in the administration of justice to protect Trump are just becoming clear. Liberals were heartened last week when Special Counsel Jack Smith asked the Supreme Court to consider short-circuiting Trump's efforts to delay his January 6th trial in Washington. Even more heartened just hours later when the court agreed, it seemed to imply at least 5 justices, including, therefore, at least 2 Republican-appointed justices, were inclined to make quick work of Trump's dilatory objections, and since his objections are frivolous, it also suggested Smith had simply outplayed Trump and his lawyers. Brief pause here. It will become confusing in a minute. I'm not certain what the court's rules are for granting or even taking steps toward granting cert before judgment. But I think in the ordinary course of things, it takes 4 justices to weigh in favor of granting cert under normal circumstances. Maybe it requires a 5th one. That one immediately jumped out at me because I'm used to seeing 4 in this. Maybe a 5th is necessary with this sort of procedural posture. I'm not really sure. And in a minute, it goes back to the 4-justice standard. So I'm not really sure exactly what's going on here, but I'm assuming that Brian looked it up or got good advice and got it right. But he goes on then to say, with respect to Trump's presidential immunity gambit, it seems he has, meaning Smith, simply outplayed Trump and his lawyers, and it's not that hard to do. But just 2 days later, at least 4, and he emphasizes that 4 Supreme Court justices agreed to hear arguments in a different high-stakes January 6th case. We made brief mention of this one. This one brought by a man named Joseph Fisher, who's been charged with obstructing an official proceeding, as have so many of them. If the court agrees that the law making it a crime to obstruct an official proceeding has been wrongly applied, that charge will be withdrawn, and hundreds of Capitol rioters could see their convictions overturned. I think this is the part requiring corrupt intent. The interaction of these cases could also provide the Supreme Court cover to delay Trump's January 6th trial past the election, even while they make quick work of his bad faith immunity appeals. And this is what I think what Brian finds appealing here is the nuance of finding a way for the Republican-controlled Supreme Court. You know, they're going to want to support Trump, generally speaking, which is weird, but probably true, since 3 of them were appointed by Trump. But if they can find a way to say, well, the immunity claims are beyond the pale, even though we decided we weren't going to use that, we facetiously decided we weren't going to use that terminology anymore. But this is a way to look like, well, no, the immunity claims that Trump is making are exactly as stupid as everybody said, but that doesn't mean we're going to kill his case. How so? Well, it's because 2 of the 4 charges in Trump's January 6th indictment stem from his violation of the same law against obstructing an official proceeding. If the Supreme Court construes that law narrowly enough to overturn the convictions of multiple Capitol rioters, it may also render the law inapplicable to Trump's conduct. Although I'm not certain I see it the same way, although we really have to examine the pleadings. But if I understand correctly, if it turns over whether or not you can prove that someone's intent was corrupt in obstructing the proceedings, I could absolutely see how it's difficult to prove corrupt intent on behalf of on the part of the rioters, but it's, I think, a lot less difficult to prove it on the part of Trump himself, especially since there's ample evidence that he was clearly instructed that he had lost and that it would be illegal and unconstitutional to intervene in this way. I mean, other people gave him contrary advice, but that's not surprising. But the fact is that there'll be I think a full record of the number of warnings and wave-offs that Trump got, and almost none in the cases of most of the January 6th rioters themselves. They may well have been warned, but there won't be as much record of it because they're ordinary schmucks, whereas Trump was allegedly the president at the time. There are going to be records of his being waved off here. But if the Supreme Court construes that law narrowly enough, right, it might have some impact. But simply agreeing to consider this appeal now, this term, while Trump awaits trial, arms the Republican justices with the tools they'd need to help Trump achieve his primary goal of delay. Wherever the Supreme Court falls in the end on the question of obstructing an official proceeding, we should expect Trump's lawyers to seek a stay of his trial pending the resolution of that question, one knowledgeable source tells me, and that could in fact be the case. You can keep reading if you are a subscriber, and I do recommend that you, like me, think about a subscription to Brian's newsletter. The rest of it, I don't know. I mean, we could peek in on it. We could even peek in on it with a free 7-day trial if you'd like. But at the moment, I'll leave it here just because I'm not as certain that the impact is a direct one. Certainly, it doesn't need to be for the Supreme Court to fool around with the damn thing. And they could absolutely say, for whatever reason, baseless or otherwise, that yes, we should grant Trump's lawyers a stay of his trial pending the resolution of that question. On the other hand, they may just as well, they could, because they'd be well justified in doing so. I don't know whether their partisan leanings will allow them to do it, but it's absolutely possible for the Justice Department to plausibly argue that it's just not applicable to Trump's trial. The January 6th defendants come to trial without a mountain of evidence describing the process by which they were all informed that they were incorrect about it, and that in order to reach the conclusion that they were legally entitled to riot, to try to disrupt this official proceeding, and they were not, and that won't change. But there won't be a mountain of evidence of their corrupt intent. However, there is a mountain of evidence about Trump's corrupt intent, and the arguments are inapplicable, and it doesn't need to be resolved before trial because a significant portion of the trial will actually focus on that and establish that corrupt intent. And so it just doesn't turn on the same question. We can, and, they might, dispose of a number of January 6th cases besides Trump's. But then again, I guess the real worry is that corrupt and partisan actors on the Supreme Court could say, well, nevertheless, we're going to say that it should delay Trump's trial because in the minds of most people, they won't be able to separate it. You said that this law was being incorrectly applied to these people. How could it possibly be being correctly applied to this other person? Well, actually, that's a pretty easy question to answer, but it won't be, if not enough people are looking deeply into the question. And, by all indications, that's not what they're going to be doing, what they're spending their time on. Okay, we approach the top of the hour break here with lots more to do, and perhaps we'll turn to some of the other suggestions from other listeners about what we ought to be paying attention to. We'll close out this segment with an addition to yesterday's discussion about the latest Clarence Thomas story. Just to note that Adam Serwer, in his reading of it, had a different angle on things, saying it was fun to think about all the handouts that Clarence Thomas is getting in the context of conservative rhetoric about welfare. And worse, lies about members of his own family. What does he mean here? He links to some of his own earlier work in the New Republic. From when? Well, I don't know, because it's not giving me the date quite that easily. There we are, May 5th, 2023. Is it his own work? Now that I can't see a byline on this, it'll make it difficult to be sure about that. But hopefully that will make itself plain afterwards. What's it about here? How Clarence Thomas smeared his own sister to gain right-wing cool points. Subheader here reads, lying about money is apparently nothing new for the Supreme Court justice, and we certainly have learned a lot about the lying he's been doing about money. But here's the story, quickly, in 30 seconds or so. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas hasn't just lied about his own finances, he's also lied about his own sister for political gain. That sounds like it sucks. Thomas is under fire for hiding multiple major financial dealings, of course, and we knew all about that. But the Washington Post also reported back in May that longtime Federalist Society executive Leonard Leo secretly paid Ginny. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Now I can correct the record here. First of all, it was Tori Otten's May 5th article in the New Republic that we were reading, not Adam Serwer's own work. But that doesn't matter, except to the extent that we should be crediting Tori and not Adam for this piece. But I'm in no way disappointed to find out that this is Tori Otten's story or anything like that. However, right before the break, we ran out of time to actually get to the real point of this article. I thought we might be able to sneak it in. You already knew, likely, that Leonard Leo was secretly paying Ginny Thomas thousands of dollars for consulting work that she did a decade ago. But the point we really wanted to reveal in all of this, lying about money is nothing new for Thomas, and that speaking to a conference of black conservatives in 1980, way back when, he wasn't on the Supreme Court. He wasn't yet close to being on the Supreme Court. Really, even the day before he was nominated to the Supreme Court, he wasn't probably considered close to being on the Supreme Court. But even earlier, 1980, Thomas described his sister as, quote, dependent on welfare and accused her of making her children feel entitled to welfare payments instead of being motivated to work. Wow. Okay. His comments reinforced a negative stereotype popular among conservatives that black people are lazy and count on welfare instead of on their own work, an attempt to set himself apart and advance his career. Even the reverse of this construction here, like when we usually hear, well, even the liberal New York Times says XYZ. And of course, here conservatives are saying to themselves, even the very black person here says this conservative thing. So you know we're right, because obviously we hate black people. And here yet this one agrees with us. We must be on to something. I mean, that's really quite disgusting, but that's the dynamic at play here. And, you know, this is him saying, well, I'm different from all the others. If you want to nominate somebody that will make you look like you're not prejudiced against black people, you can nominate me. I'll say conservative things and continue to be black. This will give you cover. You can't possibly be racist if you've nominated me, a black racist, to the Supreme Court. So that's the play. In 1980, I don't know if he's thinking about the Supreme Court at that point. He's just thinking about more jobs in a Republican administration. It looks for all the world like a Republican administration will be coming in. I don't know when in 1980 he gives this conference, but I think through most of 1980, calendar 1980, it was probably fairly simple thing to predict the end of the Jimmy Carter administration, given what was going on, and therefore an incoming Republican administration. So you can create a job path for yourself. At this point, he's a government employee and looking to move up in government employment. So he speaks to black conservatives and says, I am here to say I'm going to play ball with Reagan. How will I do that? Throwing my own sister under the bus. It's not even throwing her under the bus so much. Like, it's not like they're going to kick her door down and take away her welfare or anything. He just, and she may never have been on welfare. I don't even know whether this is like a true story about their having been any involvement with welfare, but it's the kind of thing that you can come and say, I have personal experience, not me, because if I were to take welfare, it would be super hypocritical. But if I tell you that I definitely do know somebody who takes lots of welfare, you might say, how do you know? But probably not. You could certainly, say my neighbor did that, but he decided it would be his sister. And I guess maybe that's supposed to raise the stakes for him. Why, look, he's so committed to our cause, he's even willing to turn against his own family to prove how right we really are. Well, guess what? When a reporter tracked down Thomas's sister, Emma Mae Martin, in the early 1990s, he found that nothing could be further from the truth. How do you like that? And I guess this embedded tweet is supposed to be the summation of the story here. It's from Jay Willis, who says, your periodic reminder that Clarence Thomas used to smear his own sister as a shiftless, welfare-dependent layabout in speeches to his Heritage Foundation pals. That's where he was speaking, I guess. And when reporters tracked her down, his story turned out to be extremely fake. And it's all reported in, Greensboro.com. So what paper is that? The News and Record of Greensboro, under the headline, Thomas's sister is no welfare queen. This reported on January 25th, almost coming up to the anniversary in a month or so. But 2015, there are some screen grabs that will save us the trouble, I suppose, of reading the entirety of the article. But here it is in case you want to look. Now it appears we have a new Cook-like episode. I'm not certain what the context of that is, but this one is Cooked up by federal Judge Clarence Thomas, President Bush's nominee to replace Justice Thurgood Marshall on the Supreme Court, in an often quoted speech that he delivered to a conference of black conservatives in 1980. Thomas said of his sister, who was then on welfare, she gets mad when the mailman is late with her welfare check. That's how dependent she is. What's worse is that now her kids feel entitled to the check, too. They have no motivation for doing better or getting out of that situation. But they're kids. So, anyway, to hear Thomas tell it, his sister sounded like a classic, quote, welfare queen. A painful example of how a well-intentioned government handout can tie families to a cycle of poverty and dependency. But Thomas's stunning story wasn't true. Not quite. When reporters recently tracked down Thomas's sister, Emma Mae Martin, living in a beat-up frame house in Pinpoint, Georgia, they didn't find a story of welfare dependency. Instead, they found a story of hard work by 3 generations of a family struggling like most other families do just to make ends meet. Martin was deserted by her husband in 1973, just as her father had disappeared 25 years earlier. She worked 2 minimum wage jobs, while her brother attended law school, but stopped working to take care of an elderly aunt who had suffered a stroke, which is not something, I guess, that Clarence decided to do. He kept on keeping on with his law school career. That led, of course, to a 4 or 5 year stint on welfare at some point, trying to make it on $169 a month. But that's over. She now works as a cook at the same hospital where her mother is a nurse's assistant. What about her children, who Thomas said were being indoctrinated into welfare dependency? Well, as it turns out, Mark, age 22 at that time, works as a carpenter. Christine, age 20, recently was laid off from a bakery. Leola, 15, is still a student. So, hey, can't blame her, right? And the eldest, Clarence, served aboard the battleship Wisconsin during Operation Desert Storm. What a lazy loser. Well, Trump thinks so. That's true. There may be true stories to be found of welfare cheats out there somewhere anyway. Emma Mae Martin is not one of them. In fact, her story sounds more like the story of a mom who did what you're supposed to do. Finish school, work hard, take care of your family, and raise your kids to do the same. So, what do you know? He's a big liar, and everybody should be angry with him about that. Now, back to the TNR story. Martin was, she describes the same situation. Martin was on welfare for 4 or 5 years when she was taking care of her aunt. And then when the Tribune story came out in July of 1991, Martin was working as a hospital cook. The oldest son, named after his uncle, was in the Navy. Right, Carpenter, the second one, the third oldest, had just been laid off from a bakery. The youngest was still in school. Martin seemed unbothered by her brother, who has always made himself out as a modest everyman, who pulled himself out of poverty by his own wits and work. But the reality of Thomas's sister's life are closer to the realities of most poor people, the Tribune said. It is a story of male abandonment, female sacrifice, and turning to welfare only temporarily and as a last resort, which is kind of what it's supposed to be there for. It's also a story of an inadequate government safety net for those who struggle at the bottom of society. No daycare, no health insurance, no subsidy for the working poor whose wages are not enough to lift their families above the federal poverty line. Thomas's lie about his sister is particularly hypocritical, considering how often he's claimed to be against government aid and welfare, but Thomas and his family have spent decades enjoying free travel, housing, and school that are only offered because he holds a powerful position in government. And I guess it might as well be noted he only holds that powerful position in government because he agreed to speak to places like the Heritage Foundation and make up stories about other people's dependency, even his very own family's dependency, to prove his bona fides with them. And then they said, all right, fine, great. He's never litigated a case, and he's never worked as an attorney, and he has no private litigation experience, and he's been a government employee the whole time. And he's 43 years old and still holds student debt. But let's just put him on the Supreme Court because, I don't know, the guy who died was black and he is too. And, shouldn't that be enough for everybody? And that was the end of that story. And now we're stuck with him. And stuck with him for decades. But anyway, the most interesting takeaway for me from yesterday's story was that it was probably more, it didn't panic anybody that Clarence Thomas, the great legal mind, Clarence Thomas, wasn't going to be around to save conservatives' bacon forever on the Supreme Court. He was pretty replaceable. There are lots of ideologues that they could have come up with. And by that point in 1990 or so, a good number of other black ideologues working on the conservative side of the aisle that they could have tapped for this job, considering that it didn't matter to them what kind of legal experience their nominees actually had. They could have picked anybody. But what probably worried them most about Thomas's threats to leave the bench because of financial worries was that, hey, they thought they had struck upon a genius plan to dominate the court for the next half century, nominating 40-year-olds to the Supreme Court and just saying they're going to be so honored by the opportunity that they'll sit there and take the federal salary for 50 years and die on the bench, and we'll never have to worry about the Supreme Court again. But lo and behold, it turns out that that was only good for 10 years. It might work for 40 years with people who are independently wealthy or are getting bribes and lifestyle enhancements from elsewhere. And that was the compromise they eventually worked out for him, except it didn't work out because it's highly corrupt. But maybe it will work out because we can't impeach anybody because of partisan divisions in Congress. But it must have panicked them to find out that their 50-year plan was collapsing 10 years in. That was probably worrisome for them, to say the least. Okay. So, that's of some interest. I guess, one of the other angles, I was just thinking about something else that occurred to me yesterday, and I don't know. Now the thought has escaped me, but if it returns, pops back into top of mind, we'll inject it later on. By the way, I have received some good news, that Joan is, in fact, available and planning to call in during our last segment, so we better get on with things and get to some of the other stories that are out there. If we want to shoehorn them in and think that Joan won't do that herself. She's got her own interests, of course, here. All right, let's see. What else is in pocket that I can share with you before we shift the discussion? There are a couple of them. Let's see. I'm trying to look for one that I think we can fit in the time that we've got. This should be noted, I guess. And maybe it's something, I don't know if Joan will want to give time to it necessarily, though it is a congressional development. As you know, George Santos expelled from the House, and the Republicans in New York scrambling for who can we put up for a special election on short notice to replace him. And, it's a close in New York City area seat. And even where there are enough Republicans registered in the district to make a contest out of it, it's a tough place to win and hold. And as I recall, do they make mention in here of the likeliest Democratic nominee for this would be, and have they settled this? I'm not even clear. And in New York, it's always unclear what Democrats have decided to do, but they're going with former congressman who used to actually represent this district, Tom Suozzi, and that seems a good choice. But the Republicans were at a loss for how to fill the slot from their side. Of course, there was no shortage of candidates, but it was just because, look, there's no real Republican organization here. And to the extent there is one, it's in disarray over the embarrassment of having somehow missed the ball on this and nominated George Santos. And then seeing him elected, big success. No one really expected us to win this seat. Oh my God, he's actually a huge embarrassment. What are we going to do? So they ended up naturally with like 20 people saying, I'm in. And none of them particularly distinguished. Well, I guess someone has emerged as somewhat more distinguished than the others, but one of the big problems with this person is that person is actually a Democrat. Will they change their registration in order to seize the opportunity to run? Maybe. It's not entirely clear to me, and I don't know whether this article will make it any clearer, but the New York Times reported just the other day, Republicans tap, why would they tap this person even though they're registered as a Democrat? An Israeli military veteran to run for Santos's seat. Now, ordinarily, they love running U.S. military veterans. But in this case, and in this political atmosphere, maybe they find some real advantage. Israeli military. Well, okay. Without getting into those issues, you can see how that might work better for Republicans at this point than for Democrats. But what would bring an Israeli military veteran here to the United States to run for public office? Well, everybody's life changes in some ways. And, maybe after serving in the Israeli military, you want to get the hell out of there after a while. But even more interesting than just that, you might have a certain picture in mind about Israeli military veterans who find themselves here in the United States, possibly running for Congress. But you might not have guessed that, one, this is a woman, and two, that she is Ethiopian born, and I guess has been hopping locations around the globe at least every 10 years or so since. I don't know. Well, I'm not entirely sure of the entire life background, but not an uncommon story, but a little uncommon when it comes to running for United States Congress. We'll have to admit that much. Party leaders believe Mazi Melesa Pilip has the potential to be a breakout star. Maybe. But she has little political experience. That's not a huge barrier. And her policy views are largely unknown. Well, remember this is a local Republican Party that has embarrassed itself before, but it would be a very different kind of embarrassment if it just turned out, well, the person we nominated isn't really much of a Republican or isn't one at all, versus this person has 19 different identities and has been stealing credit cards from the mothers of fellow members of Congress. That's a very different kind of embarrassment. So what's the story? Nicholas Fandos is covering it here. Republicans battling to hold on to the New York House seat vacated by George Santos chose on Thursday another relatively unknown candidate with a remarkable biography. I mean, Santos had a remarkable biography too, but in a different way, and it wasn't real. But also a thin political resume here, and they've chosen this person to run in a special election next year after extensive vetting. Really? Republican leaders selected Mazi, M-A-Z-I, Melesa Pilip, P-I-L-I-P, a local legislator, so there's some experience there, born in Ethiopia, who served as a paratrooper in the Israel Defense Forces and first ran for office in 2021, vowing to fight anti-Semitism. So this will work fairly well at the moment with Republicans who are waging a hypocritical battle against anti-Semitism, despite being largely populated with anti-Semites themselves. It was a bold gamble. Everyone loves bold gambles. By Long Island Republicans, a group better known for nominating older white establishment figures. Hasn't served them well lately, though. Republicans believe Ms. Pilip, a 44-year-old mother of 7, has the potential to become a breakout star before the February 13th special election, particularly at a moment when Israel's war with Hamas is reordering American politics. She is the American success story, although really an Israeli success story, said Peter King. Remember him? Former New York Republican congressman involved in the nomination. Some people have superstar capacity. She walks into the room. People notice her. They listen to her. That may very well be true. Ms. Pilip, however, lacks many of the credentials typically prized in a competitive congressional race. She has almost no experience raising money, lacks relationships with key party figures outside her affluent New York City suburb, and has never faced the kind of scrutiny that comes with being a candidate for high office. In fact, beyond fierce advocacy for Israel, to be expected, I think, and support for the police, she has taken no known public positions on major issues that have shaped recent House contests. That includes abortion rights, gun laws, and the criminal charges against former President Donald Trump. The panel of Republicans from Queens and Nassau counties voted to nominate her from among more than 20 candidates Thursday morning. They plan to introduce her publicly on Friday in Massapequa, colloquially known as Matzah Pizza. Just a descriptor of the demographics there, by the way. 2 weeks after the House voted to expel Santos for damning findings that he fabricated his life story and defrauded donors. Analysts have called the race a toss-up. Ms. Pilip's relative anonymity stands in sharp contrast with her Democratic opponent, Tom Suozzi. Former congressman, Nassau County executive, and candidate for governor, Suozzi has been a fixture in Long Island politics since the 1990s, accumulating a lengthy voting record. Not always an advantage. He even once held the House seat they are competing for. The two candidates do have at least one thing in common. They are both registered Democrats. Ooh. Republicans who have supported Ms. Pillip twice in elections for a Nassau County legislature seat representing Great Neck and Manhasset said they were fully aware that she maintained that registration, calling it irrelevant. And in New York, it may be. In her first interview as a candidate on Thursday afternoon, Ms. Pillip would not say whether she planned to switch party affiliations, and she declined to discuss her policy positions in depth. As a county legislator, much of her work has been nonpartisan or local in scope, funding roads, administering grants, overseeing police. That's a national issue. When she was asked to state her position on a national abortion ban, a spokesman for the Nassau County Republican Party cut in to say that the candidate did not intend to, quote, get through the whole party platform here. Well, okay, I guess fair enough, but let her speak. Ms. Pillip was ready to knock President Biden, that's easy enough to do, I guess, if you want, who won the district by 8 points in 2020 for some of the nation's thorniest challenges, including the influx of migrants, which, of course, she's an immigrant herself, not necessarily migrant, but this, of course, on the southern border, and the high rate of inflation that she said was destroying average Americans, even though, as it turns out, it's not. She also suggested that Mr. Biden's foreign policy had emboldened Russia to invade Ukraine. Really, that was him. And Hamas to attack Israel on October 7th. No. And she probably knows that better than any of us. But she'll be able to get away with the lie because she'll say, I lived in Israel. You have to listen to me. His policies are a complete disaster for the American people, she said. Local Republicans subjected Ms. Pillip to extensive scrutiny, you would think that they would, including by 3 outside research firms. Party leaders said they had done so to avoid backing another nominee like Mr. Santos, whose egregious lies went undetected by Republicans for years. Having reviewed those records, we feel comfortable that they have done a complete background check, said Joseph Kagro Jr., the Nassau Republican chairman. We know everything we need to know about Mozzie. Oh boy. Well, that will probably doom you at some point. Ms. Pillip also distanced herself from Mr. Santos, whom she once campaigned alongside and called an amazing friend, saying she had called for him to resign shortly after his fabricated biography unraveled. Other finalists for the nomination included Mike Sapriconi, maybe, a wealthy former New York Police Department detective. How did that happen? Who owns a private security business. Okay. And Kellen Curry, an Air Force veteran and banker. But as a veteran of color, Ms. Pillip fits the mold of other successful candidates Republicans have recruited across the country in recent years. That's interesting that they have such a mold, even though they usually hate the people who fit that mold. But that's why they're doing this. Born in Ethiopia, she said she was among thousands of Jews from that country, yes, resettled in Israel in 1991 as part of Operation Solomon. She moved to the United States later after her military service and meeting her husband, a Ukrainian-American doctor. Wow. Interesting. She entered local politics after serving as vice president of an Orthodox Jewish congregation in Great Neck, and many of her public appearances have focused on defending Israel or fighting anti-Semitism. Her politics appear to have evolved rightward alongside those of other members of Great Neck's large Jewish community. Any qualms about the limits of her name recognition and experience remained private, and national Republicans quickly endorsed the pick. Okay, well, that's probably all you really need to know about this, but, well, we'll get through it because it'll bring us to the break, and then we'll shift gears and welcome Joan to the show. And I don't know, maybe she'll have something to say about this race, or at least the vacancy that created it. Let's see. Who's speaking here? Oh, yes. Okay. Some more Republican operatives saying wonderful things about her. Mozzie's incredible life of service stands in stark contrast to her career politician, Tom Suozzi, who uses his office to make life better for himself instead of his community. Who's saying this? We don't know. Representative Richard Hudson of North Carolina. Oh, okay. The chairman of the Republicans' House Campaign Committee. Very little known to me, but that's his job. He's supposed to smear whoever is running for any seat as a Democrat. Democrats, for their part, wasted little time vilifying Ms. Pillip. I don't know if that's wise, but we'll see. Congresswoman Susan Delbene, did she say Suzanne or Susan? I don't know. Of Washington, who I have heard of, Mr. Hudson's Democratic counterpart, by the way, called Ms. Pillip a MAGA extremist Is she? Maybe. I don't know. I don't know anything about her. Maybe she's right. And highlighted her past ties to Mr. Santos. Mr. Suozzi did not comment directly on Ms. Phillip. He has quickly sought to claim the race's middle lane. That would imply that there are three, but okay. He formally launched his campaign last Saturday in Levittown in the front yard of a former New York Police Department officer who said Mr. Suozzi was the only Democrat he would ever support, although he might be just as comfortable with Ms. Phillip here in all this. Flanked by dozens of supporters, Suozzi vowed to campaign against. Well, do you really need to know? I mean, it's good stuff, right? We'll be supporting him, presumably, but okay, vowed to campaign against what he called threats to the suburban American dream, a growing affordability crisis, climate change, dysfunction in Washington, and the influx of migrants across the southern border. Oh, boo. All right. Well, of course, he had to try to sneak that one in there. We're a little bit late on the music here, but we can make it up to you. And when we do return, we'll be joined by Joan McCarter, senior political writer at Daily Kos, in case you didn't know who was coming on board in the next half hour. Close things out for the day with some discussion of what the hell's going on there, for how long will it be going on, and when will they start taking vacation, and where is Chris Coons going to eat? Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Joan McCarter is here. We're, of course, discussing the weather, because that's just a nice pleasantry to start with. Have you upgraded your weather situation with your move? Is the weather considerably worse in Idaho at this point?
The heat is worse. It's for a shorter duration.
Okay.
But it's worse because I don't have air conditioning in this house yet.
Oh, okay. Well. But that's not a concern now.
Likewise, the cold is worse because it's a 100-year-old house that's poorly insulated.
Okay.
The furnace is too small. But any day now, we're going to get those wonderful tax credits and rebates from the Inflation Reduction Act, and I can get a furnace that actually works.
Oh, okay.
And has a heat pump, so I can have air conditioning.
That would be nice.
You know, if you're looking for a major upgrade on any of your electrical systems, just wait a little bit for the law to kick in your state, for them to be ready to implement it.
Okay. Well, you could always use that.
Induction stoves, heat pump water heaters.
True. All
kinds of things. House rewiring, insulation, new windows, new doors. It's all coming.
Yes. And then we can all
get there.
Read about it in the newspaper when they tell us how bad the economy is and how nobody can spend any money for anything except for the thousands of dollars they're using to improve their energy efficiency at home and saving more money. You know how these things go.
I am rather discouraged, though, because how few people know about this.
Yeah. Well, I guess if it hasn't been implemented
the administration really needs to be out there hyping it, I think.
But, yeah. Although, you know, there is also, they'll go out and hype it, which would be a good thing. And I mean, it's got its place. It's good information. People need to know it. And then, of course, they'll just be facing newspaper critics saying, how can they be talking about this when they should be talking about that? Well,
true.
Life goes on. I mean, there's some terrible things happening in the country that we should be, and around the world that we should keep our eye on. But in the meantime, like, you need a heater for your house, right? Yeah, so there's always that split.
Cheap.
Right.
You can get a really good one cheap.
Listen,
it's energy efficient.
Sure. I promise you that Abigail Spanberger wants us to talk about that stuff. You know, she always, it's a kitchen table thing. In fact,
very much. I mean, this is the ultimate kitchen table kind of thing.
Exactly. The only way it could be more kitchen table if there were subsidies for new kitchen tables themselves, which we may have to go that route just to make sure that people talk about it.
We might, but you can get your new induction stove, so that's a kitchen thing.
That's true. It's right near the table, presumably. That would count. Maybe we need to, how about subsidies for subscribing to newspapers where they talk about kitchen table issues?
There you go.
We can do that. Okay. Then everyone will be happy. Okay. Well, let's see. It is, we're a week from Boxing Day, as it turns out. That's an important date. And I've read this morning that everybody wants to go home already in Congress. There's not going to be any deal. Chris Coons has dinner reservations. Literally true. He's actually right in the middle of the, come on, couldn't we be getting out of here early discussions? Which,
did he really say that?
Yeah. And so it didn't say that he had dinner reservations, and he probably doesn't, because most people won't unless he's going out for Chinese food for the traditional, like maybe the traditional Jewish Christmas dinner. But I doubt it. I don't know what he's got on tap, but he's probably got reservations somewhere, whether it's at a resort or something. But I couldn't believe that he's in the middle of the discussions of can't we leave early? But that's trademark Chris Coons, I guess.
It is trademark
Delaware.
Chris Coons.
Really. You got to do better than that.
Yeah, they're there. They're not going to get anything done.
Yes, that was
because
the news.
Republicans don't want to. We don't talk about that part so much.
But we could. We're here at the
Republicans really don't want Ukraine to get this aid. Even Mitch McConnell has agreed on this strategy of delaying, of creating this obstacle of finding some kind of immigration policy that so far is horrible, that Democrats should not be signing off on. When Schumer said last week, okay, we're staying in because we've got this deal in the works, plenty of Republicans said, no, not me, and left.
Yeah. Oh, well,
not intending to come back at all. So,
yeah, I guess that's sort of their usual MO, right? Like, underlying all of this should be understood that if they solve the problems that they love to complain about, then they don't have those issues to come. They could certainly make up anything they want. They don't have to be true, but these are the ones that the talking points have already been typed for these, and no one wants to do extra work. So why not blow up any progress towards any solutions and be able to keep these talking points for now? We'll link these two issues together because together they're irreconcilable. That way we know we'll be able to continue to complain that Biden is doing wrong to us on both of these issues.
Which, by the way, they are all doing for Donald Trump.
True. And
the harsh immigration policy that I really, really, really hope the Biden administration doesn't decide to sign off on. It's not looking good so far, what they've been willing to negotiate away to get this Ukraine aid. Which is essential, but at the same time,
I can understand
enacting more of the Trump immigration rules, really racist, awful.
Yeah, it's demoralizing.
Humanitarian rules, unhumanitarian, inhumane.
Yes. Okay, there you go.
It's a devil's decision. It's bad either way.
Yeah. I can see
it. And, Mitch McConnell signed off on it, so there you go. Of course it's bad.
Yeah, so, I mean, I guess the thinking is, well, if we can get one of the two things to come out, better, i.e. the aid flows to Ukraine, that's better than getting neither of them. But, of course, I don't really believe even that there's anybody inside the administration or among the Democratic ranks who believes, well, if we do this, then the Republicans won't be able to criticize us on the border anymore. I think they all know. No. We'll be criticized on the border. They'll just continue to say that we're somehow not doing the right thing.
They should know that. They should know that. The only thing I can think of that might make it palatable is if it is done by executive rule rather than legislation, so that it can be reversed more easily.
But that'll really require some explaining, as then people will say, he actually did it himself. This means he wanted to do it. It wasn't forced on him by Congress. Well, in a backhanded way, like you just explained. Well, that would be easily reversed later on. Like if, for instance, Ukraine got the aid they needed and turned the tide, and I don't know, the war isn't likely to end in any time soon. But if that were miraculously to happen, either now or during a next Biden administration, and then you could say, well, I'll tell you what, we got what we needed. They won the war. I'm reversing the immigration policy, and, go F yourself, as Dick Cheney once said. You could absolutely do that. And you wouldn't be, having to wait on Congress to get around. It wouldn't be a hostage to anything else. But boy, that would be difficult to explain up front. And going into an election year, don't know if they'd want to do it.
Yeah.
But is Joe Biden the kind of guy who thinks he can brave that storm? Maybe. He occasionally does jump into things and say, yeah, I'll be the lightning rod. That's okay. I think it's going to come out okay on the other end. As elder statesman, pinnacle of his career, would he try it? Well, if it was 2025 and he had been reelected, I'd say yeah.
There you go.
Right. So we'll see. Good observation there, though, for everybody to see. Should it come to that kind of action, there would be an uproar, despite the fact that you will have explained it ahead of time. But the listeners here will know, okay, I see what he's doing here. Though my initial reaction is the opposite of what he wanted.
And it still needs to pass muster with the Congressional Hispanic Caucus and all of the progressives in both chambers. Mm-hmm. And thus far, they're very concerned and they're not happy with it. So, it's bad.
Right. Well, at least, we don't want to get in the way of Chris Coons' plans. That's the key point. I really don't know. I thank God he didn't say what they are.
Might be able to get done this week. There is a point to being in this week after all. There are more nominations to work through. And there are still 11 four-star generals and big guys in the military, guys and women, who are blocked by Tommy Tuberville.
Yes.
So they're going to try to get those done too.
Yeah. Well, so this sets up well for them to do that. If we're not going to need the floor for anything else, we really can plod through some number of those 11, if not all of them.
Right. I think they're working on trying to get an agreement to do them in a block. Okay. Last I saw. So, I don't know if Tuberville is one of the people that's decided to skip this week. I don't know if there's anybody there to, stand in and be his blocker.
Not Chris Coons. He's done. They're very low on numbers.
The only one last time that actually stood up and said, I will help Tuberville in this blocking of hundreds. Yeah. I think it was more than 450 by the time they finally got him to relent and lift the thing.
Yes. Well, okay. I mean, so the bulk of them have gone through this. If there was ever any sense to the blockade, it's certainly down to, the big, far more political top ranks are the places where you ought to be applying that pressure. Those would be the policymakers. If you think you're in this about policy, I mean, he may not be, but if you're looking to make it look like it,
about policy, really, maybe he was in it about policy from the beginning, but Tuberville really wasn't smart enough to know exactly what it was he was doing. Yeah, and I don't know that he necessarily recognized that there were new promotions coming up every month, and by the time we hit December, there would be more than 400.
Yeah, he may have had no idea how that worked from the beginning.
I don't think he did.
Well, luckily, hopefully they'll be able to get through a couple of these things and at the very least demonstrate the difficulty involved in getting those things moving. It would be interesting if they had to spend the bulk of the week working out the deal to get an en bloc consideration of some or all of them. And hopefully they won't then run out of time. But
or, they can tee it up at least for early when they return on January 8th or 9th. I think it's the 9th when there are actually going to be votes.
Okay. And they may work something out where some portion of the 11 get a voice vote from the last people to turn the lights out before the Christmas holiday. We'll see, but some things are changing, and the whole thing was a bit of a puzzlement and helped isolate Tuberville from the rest of his colleagues, and maybe they were welcoming him back into the fold now that he's letting things go, but thank God he was there to try and make sure that our armed forces were more pro-life. Okay, that's really not the mission, but
kind of ironic too.
It's a weird thing, but okay, they have domestic lives, and to the extent that they do, thanks for trying to ruin them, Senator. That was really nice.
They do kind of exist to kill people.
Yeah, I mean, it's really not the first place you should worry about pro-life. But yeah, I don't know. It was an odd consideration, and really, honestly, the whole idea it turned everything about Republicans' approach to the military on its head, which was kind of like you let them do what they want to do because of who they are and the role that they serve.
Which again, we've talked about this before. If anything, this should sort of spur the Senate on to say, really, do we really have to be involved at this level in these promotions?
Yeah.
Shouldn't this be something that the Pentagon's handling on its own?
Yeah, and they may want to give them more autonomy to do that. Call us when there are stars involved. And, everything else, this is really your job. And I mean, those nominations are coming from inside the Pentagon. It's not like the Senate is deciding who to promote.
And there's a schedule for people who are behaving well and doing their job. I mean, there's a scale for them, and there's a ladder that they just go up automatically. And there's no reason for the Senate to be involved in that. Yeah,
I know. I guess it's a check of sorts, but all right. Well, we'll see whether this creates any reform ideas. Yeah,
it probably won't.
Because they fixed it. Oh, we're done. I got to dinner. This will never happen again. Well, we'll never get senator this dumb.
You and I know how long it takes any kind of Senate procedural change to happen.
Right. So, maybe, it might just, and if it doesn't happen, it'll just incentivize other people to do it. Next time it'll be Rand Paul making this problem instead. I mean, he's done it before.
Probably not on this scale. I mean, Rand Paul has done some blanket holds, but none as massive as this one.
Yeah. Well, this was kind of unusual. Well, all right. With that on our minds, I mean, what other, that's kind of all the work that's pending before Congress, before they bail out. You must have been interested in the Clarence Thomas story, though, yesterday.
Yes. Sounds kind of like extortion, doesn't it?
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. Oh, now I remember what I was thinking. There was another angle on this that I thought was interesting. As I was struck by, as I think I saw at least one or two other people on social media, struck by the weird idea that good old, reliably anti-union Clarence Thomas threatened to withhold his labor unless he got a raise. I thought that was interesting for him to threaten, but... Well, he backed down in the end, I guess, because somebody did. Well, he got the raise.
He got the raise. Harlan Crow stepped up and started subsidizing his lifestyle. Yeah,
I thought that was interesting. I thought it was also interesting to see the Yale law professor saying it wasn't a bribe; it was just an enhancement of his lifestyle. What? I mean,
it's also really interesting to see, as soon as he got that job, how deep in debt they went.
Yeah.
He and Ginny.
Yeah, that was a little
immediately he was like, all right, I'm gonna live this life now that I'm a Supreme Court justice. And
Yeah, I guess he got himself in trouble.
$8,000 down on a $500,000 property.
Yeah.
In Virginia. They're just spending like crazy.
Yeah.
Going very, very deep into debt.
So I thought, all right, well, if you have a guaranteed income for life, well, a house, okay. I mean, that's a little extravagant I think they moved in Alexandria, and I don't know where you get 5 acres in Alexandria. That's impossible to do now. But, okay, and a Corvette. Like, it wasn't a Rolls Royce, but okay. Still, you should watch the bottom line here. Then he's taking on care of his great nephew, is it?
I think so, yeah.
Which he may or may not have known was coming, but like you could at that point say, well, maybe not an elite boarding school. Maybe I did just buy a house in Alexandria. By the way, other people are knocking their brains out to get a house in Alexandria so that you don't have to save for private school tuition.
Right, because the schools there are good.
Yeah, but not Clarence Thomas, because of course he found this other source of income, so why not? But yeah, it was interesting. He very quickly decided that he was set for life, I guess, but then realized 10 years down the road, I'm not at this rate. I'm not set for life. And besides, which life am I set for? What if I could be set for a jet-setting lifestyle instead?
Yeah.
That would be pretty awesome. I thought that was an interesting story. And yeah, a couple of weird angles on that one, including also I was surprised to see Republicans panicked at the prospect of Clarence Thomas retiring, if only because he's so replaceable. I mean, that's okay. You can just find another ideologue. Maybe you can't find a minority ideologue, which is what they were looking for. But what probably bothered them most was, shoot, our plan to put 40-somethings on the court and just let them die there 50 years later has only worked for 10 years. They're ready to look for the exits. We need to find bribes to keep them there. Shoot, let's try working on lifting. They never did succeed in lifting, I guess, the speaking fees, but they did placate him by just finding billionaires to give him money and trips instead. But that must have
McConnell did try
them.
on the speaking fees.
Yeah, he gave it a shot. Yeah, I don't know why.
I also learned from that story that Alito has, was it 7 kids, 9 kids?
Oh, yeah.
An extraordinary number of children.
Yeah, that seems like, that's a lot. So he's got a lot of expenses to take care of as well. I learned a lot from that story. I also liked the one about the year-end report from Rehnquist at the end of 2000, saying that the most important issue facing the judiciary is raising salaries. The 2 weeks after issuing Bush v. Gore. No, the biggest problem you have is elsewhere. But this one affects you. That's true.
Yeah.
But the biggest one I'll admit to is I don't make enough money. Okay. That was interesting.
Speaking of.
Yeah.
Sandra Day O'Connor's memorial services today.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I will never think of Sandra Day O'Connor without thinking about how she just didn't want Al Gore to be the president.
Yeah. And that was really brought home.
She did come back
recently.
later and tell us that she regretted that decision.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's true. But yeah, and lest that be the last word on it, a lot of people took the moment to dig up exactly how deep in it she really was. And there's some really interesting passages from books written at the time about her basically, being among the first that I was aware of on the modern court anyway, buying into, stupid right-wing rumors that just turned out not to be true. That turned out to be a big trend among Republican nominees to the court. But the quotes about her being at a holiday party and saying, I heard, basically repeating Rush Limbaugh type stories. The Republicans are cheating left and right. That's why I have to stop Gore. Okay, well, but none of that was true and there was no basis for it. Oh, well, in that case, I regret that. But it's too late. And then later that became a big tradition. Why? There's a broccoli mandate. There's a Cornhusker kickback. There's a this, that, the other thing. No, all untrue, and they go to great pains to make sure there's no like internet connectivity in the clerk's chambers at the court to cut themselves off from stuff leaking out, but apparently no controls on what leaks in. So, maybe if you stuck to the pleadings and the arguments, you'd be in better shape and not listening to the radio. But there's no prohibition on that. There's no ethical code either. So that's a dangerous combination.
Speaking of pleadings and arguments, did you see the story a couple weeks ago in Politico about how many of the amicus briefs, I think like 60 or 70% of the amicus briefs the court received in the last year, or I think it was last year. It's fuzzy now. I wrote on it, but I wrote on it when it came out.
Oh, okay, I can find it and we'll dig it up.
Come from Leonard Leo's network.
It rings a bell, certainly, and it makes sense.
It's a humongous percentage.
Yeah, what else are they going to do?
And what's really terrifying is, like in the case of the Dobbs court, or the Dobbs decision, rather, they are taking the arguments put in these briefs from Leonard Leo's people and writing them into the decisions.
Yeah. And it's not surprising given how things work on the court, and most of those people are now they're working for think tanks, which is where I guess you park somebody who's been through the ringer. You park them as a clerk for these conservative justices. They establish a relationship, but the clerkship only lasts a year. What are you going to do with all these people who have cultivated this sort of right-wing thought process and close relationships with the justices? Well, one thing you could do is park them in think tanks that then file amicus briefs. And the justices are used to it because the sad truth of it is that most of the opinions credited to the justices are written by their clerks. And, to some extent or another, there's more or less input, control, feedback, and discussion with the justices. But some justices are perfectly content to say, look, I leave it up to you. I'm just here to collect $175,000 to $300,000 over the years per year. And that's all I'm interested in doing. And what a great job that is, considering I don't have to do any of the work except sit there and not ask questions. Other justices are more involved and they like the debating, but the hard part, the writing, is done by their clerks. And if they just, have some good ones and say, but I can't keep you for 10 years. Now, of course, yes, I can. You'll just be writing the opinions in amicus briefs, and I'll just, instruct our current clerks to steal from those.
Paid by Leonard Leo.
Right.
We are.
Exactly, right? I can't pay for you to have 50 clerks, but I can do it on the outside. And it's not like the current clerks are going to object to the easy work of just lifting from the amicus briefs, although they may have ideas that they want to inject into there too. I don't know how they feel about it, but if they're ideologues, they don't care.
If they're Sam Alito, they'd take all of those arguments, no matter how specious they are.
Right.
Like, the core of his Dobbs decision was that since medieval times, abortion has been considered murder. No, it hasn't.
No, quite the opposite. But
a non-historian wrote that in an amicus brief, and it made it into the decision, and there we are.
Well, now it's official, and it's got the imprimatur of the Supreme Court, and they get to build on it as precedent. Since medieval times, broccoli has been mandated. Okay, I don't know. It got in there somehow, and now it's a famous quote, so let's use it. Just like Bush v. Gore. Never use this again. We may need this. Let's use it again. It's quite a system that they've built for themselves, and it's interesting that, Leo has exploited a kind of a loophole there and just formalized it. But I guess all he's doing is saying that conservative justices can have 50 clerks at a time, and, well, I guess liberal justices are free to do it. It's just that, there's no such support network for them. Everybody has to go out and make their own way after a clerkship. So, I mean, they usually do. They're just fine. But they're not being paid to continue to consult with the liberal justices and solidify their work. It's up to the litigants to actually make the case. What do you know? That is an interesting development. All right. Well, I'll look backwards for your piece on that to include, so everybody can go and see what the numbers were.
One of the things that's kind of interesting right now, thanks to Sheldon Whitehouse hammering away at this constantly, is that the Judicial Conference does have a committee looking at the network behind the amicus briefs, and they're trying to come up with some, and I'm not holding my breath, it is going to be a really good one, but come up with a disclosure process.
Okay.
For who's filing these briefs and who's getting paid to file these briefs. So that's something.
Yeah, I mean, it'll give us a database to work with at any rate, and you'll be able to say, all right, this person is doing this, and it should be noted that they're being funded by, let's say, interested parties in the case, or just ideologues and weirdos that we should always be on the lookout for. That's something. Yeah, I mean, it'll be extraordinarily difficult.
And, the good news is the more we talk about this, the more those 3 Trump nominees think, do we really want to have our names associated with this for the rest of our careers?
Yeah.
I think it does have a tempering effect on their actions.
All we could do is hope so. I mean, we should continue applying that pressure. It's always good to know where the arguments are coming from, and maybe 1 or 2 or 3 of them will rack up enough debt that they feel like they have to go on strike as well. It worked for Clarence Thomas. Does raise questions about those baseball tickets again and what happened to that debt after all, but that question ever present. Okay, well, thanks for stopping by today. I imagine you'll be busy next Tuesday, so we'll push it to the new year like the Congress did. How about that? Okay, thanks, Joan. Happy holidays. War on Christmas.
Happy holidays to you.
Have a good war on Christmas. We'll see you afterwards. Oh, you can sue for peace with Christmas. It's okay. And the rest of you should do so, too. We're at peace with that. And Justice Putnam will be coming up next. He may yet want to prosecute the war on Christmas just a little bit longer and press his advantage. But stay tuned for the usual odd and eclectic collection of stories from around the country and around the world, even those we've missed here today.